If you've been watching my videos for a while, or are familiar with evidence-based cognitive and behavioral techniques that help tackle chronic insomnia and improve sleep for the long term, you might have heard of stimulus control. This involves relearning to associate the bed with sleep rather than unpleasant wakefulness, and is achieved by getting out of bed whenever sleep is proving to be difficult. There can be no doubt that this technique is difficult, especially in the short term. However, it can be really helpful. If you've tried getting out of bed in the past, or just the thought of getting out of bed during the night generates worry or anxiety, I may have a slight modification for you to consider. And this is what I'm going to be talking about in today's video. Hi, I'm Martin Reed. If you have insomnia, I offer sleep coaching programs that will give you all the skills and support you need to enjoy better sleep for the rest of your life. You can learn more at insomniacoach.com. If you find that you get really sleepy before going to bed, but then feel wide awake, or find it hard to fall asleep when you get into bed, if you find it hard to fall back to sleep when you wake during the night, or if just the very idea of getting into bed generates worry or anxiety, it's possible that you could be experiencing symptoms of conditioned arousal. The mind is very powerful at forming associations. We might notice our belly growling or our mouth watering whenever we smell a loaf of bread baking, for example. That's because after repeatedly smelling and then enjoying some fresh bread, we learn to associate the smell alone with the positive experience of eating freshly baked bread. If we usually sit down on the couch and turn on the TV in the evening with a glass of wine, the simple act of sitting down on the couch in the evening can act as a prompt for our mind to start thinking about wine. If we've been pulled over a few times for speeding, every time we're driving and spot a police car, we might notice our pulse quicken as our mind has learned to associate seeing the police when out driving with getting pulled over and ticketed. And so it goes with sleep. If we regularly get into bed, enjoy being in bed, and sleep well in bed, our mind associates the bed with sleep and relaxation. If we regularly get into bed and spend a lot of time wide awake, feeling frustrated, angry, anxious or worried, then our mind associates the bed with a lot of unpleasant wakefulness. If our mind has learned to associate the bed with unpleasant wakefulness, it can activate the body's fight or flight response when we go to bed in order to protect us from the perceived threat associated with being in bed. Of course, this is not helpful when it comes to sleep, since sleep only happens when we're sleepy enough for sleep and when we are calm and relaxed enough for sleep. The good news is that just as the mind can form associations, it can unform them or learn new associations. If you can recall a time when being in bed felt great and you slept well, but now you feel wide awake and worried as soon as you get into bed or as soon as you wake during the night, this suggests that your mind might have formed a new and less helpful association. This means that you can, once again, form a new, more helpful association and help make the bed a long-term trigger for sleep. This is typically done by using the bed only for sleep and by getting out of bed if sleep doesn't seem to be happening. One of the most popular ways to implement this technique is based on the estimate of time. If you've been awake for 15 to 30 minutes, that's your cue to get out of bed for 15 to 30 minutes before returning to bed and repeating the process. Now, since the goal of this technique isn't to make you fall back to sleep that night, although that might happen, but is a long-term strategy to help address conditioned arousal, it does take time and consistency to get results. In the meantime, the very thought and required effort involved in getting in and out of bed, perhaps throughout the night, can itself generate arousal and lead to people quite understandably not trying the technique, or abandoning the technique before they get results. So for people who find the idea of estimating periods of wakefulness during the night, and who find the idea of getting out of bed to be worse than staying in bed, I like to suggest a slightly different approach. If you're awake at night, but being in bed feels good, allow yourself to remain in bed because conditions are probably right for sleep. If, on the other hand, you're awake in bed and it doesn't feel good, for example, your mind is racing, you're worried, frustrated, angry, or anxious, then you might use that as a prompt to get out of bed and do something you find relaxing and enjoyable until you feel conditions are better for sleep. Then you might return to bed and repeat this process as needed. When you implement this technique, getting out of bed should always be a more appealing alternative to staying in bed, because you're only getting out of bed when being in bed doesn't feel good. You're also giving yourself the opportunity to shift focus and attention away from sleep by engaging in a relaxing and somewhat enjoyable activity. Watching TV is just fine. And you prevent yourself from reinforcing a negative association between the bed and unpleasant wakefulness. Furthermore, if you are implementing this technique alongside an appropriate and consistent sleep window, there will only be a limited opportunity for extended nighttime wakefulness and/or potential nighttime yo-yoing. And since sleep drive always wins in the end, if you only allow yourself to sleep during your sleep window and you only allow yourself to sleep in bed, that is when and where you will sleep. Every minute you spend asleep in bed and every minute you spend out of bed when being in bed doesn't feel good is a minute spent retraining your mind to associate the bed with sleep and pleasant wakefulness. The end result is you make your bed a strong long-term trigger for sleep, and you give yourself a more pleasant alternative to staying in bed when being in bed doesn't feel good. And that generally helps improve, even if only a little, the quality of your nights. So I hope you found this short video helpful. If you did, please click the like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I do try to share a new sleep snippet video every week. If you have any questions, comments, feedback, or suggestions for a future video, please leave a comment below, or you can email me directly. My email address is hello@insomniacoach.com. Thanks for watching, and as always, I'd like to leave you with this important reminder. You can sleep.